So with the removal of domicile as a sort of tax thing, and we've spoken obviously about the non-dom scheme and its replacement, of course, the sort of famous tax, if you like, that domicile really relates to is inheritance tax. So what changes are they making there?
So effectively, they are making it residence-based. So HMRC will consider you to be a long-term resident once you have been in the UK for at least 10 years out of the previous 20 years prior to your death. So effectively, if you're in year 11 or longer in the UK, then effectively you're going to be subject to inheritance tax on your worldwide assets. And
what that could mean is if you've been outside the UK for like 9 years, having been previously resident long term, you're still inside the inheritance tax net, even if you're living in Timbuktu.
Yes. And it's one of those as well where actually there could be pros as well as cons. So you quite often you hear on occasion of instances where people, I think Richard Burton was the big one who lived his last 20 years of his life in Switzerland, but because he happened to have the Welsh flag draped over his coffin and
Wales.
Then he fell within the scope of UK inheritance tax. For cases like that, where effectively somebody has effectively broken ties with the UK and lived outside of the UK for such a long period of time.
It's going to be much easier, isn't it? Because I mean, there are always these cases, aren't there, about what constitutes domicile.
Yes.
There was a lady in South Africa who was done because they found letters where she'd referred to the UK as home, even though she hadn't been in the UK for 25 years. So I suppose it makes it much cleaner.
Exactly. It's a bit like the statutory residence test in terms of, you
might not like it, but it is what it is, and you can just see whether or not you fit into it or not.
Exactly. And I know we don't necessarily like to mention trusts, but we probably should do. Effectively, those who are currently non-doms and have offshore trusts set up outside of the UK up until now, if they then became domiciled or deemed domiciled in the UK further to the setup of the trust.
The trust stayed outside.
Yeah, that would stay outside the scope of UK inheritance tax. That is effectively being kiboshed. And if you are a long-term resident, then effectively those offshore trusts are going to be subject to inheritance tax. The one thing that I'm not particularly clear on at this precise moment in time, but there may be further information that I need to have a look at, but is what happens if people who effectively at this stage would be considered long-term resident, if they were to leave the UK prior to the
rules.
Yeah, would that have any sort of impact in terms of those offshore trusts being dragged into the UK tax net?
Some interesting reading to come by the sounds of it.
I think so.